Hey guys, Mustached Tom here, and initially I was gonna wait for The Boys to finish up its season 4 before making a full review for the season. But, as it would turn out, I've seen some coverage lately that has done a extremely piss poor job in covering it, from the Critical Drinker, who a lot of other people have covered on YouTube, saying how he has made clearly a lot of definitive statements without even watching the show, and has left, his ideals in the hands of the, not even the critics, the fan reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. And I was going to initially cover that and go over that is not how you review a show, obviously. But a lot of other people covered it, so I was like, okay, they got it covered, let's move on. However, sometime later, EFaps came on to 92, as you can see on the top left there. And their opening segment was about The Boys Season 4, and sort of dropping down into this one episode, this one moment in particular, and going after the creator and his decisions. Now, I can't believe I have to say this, but I thought death of the author was a thing that they believed in. I guess not. As they use these quotes from the director to go over this particular scene about sexual assault and proceed to go over how bad it is in conjunction with what the creator had said, which I thought was extremely poor of them to do. I thought EFaps was all about just looking at the work individually and, putting together, pulling out the, sort of things that you need to pull out to say whether or not a thing is good or bad and how they can improve if it is bad. I thought that was EFaps' goal, but no, that is not what they did here for this coverage of The Boys. Instead, they used these quotes to, again, as I implied, to insinuate that therefore The Boys is bad because the creator said, it was funny, the scene was meant to be funny or whatever. Spoilers for The Boys, I guess, moving forward. And I'm going to go over the same exact scenes and setup for said scene that happens. And I'm also going to talk about what happens after, which is something EFaps doesn't even cover because, again, I would actually even I would go as far as saying bad faith on their part. They don't even reach the end conclusion of that segment because they completely remove this entire segment of the episode to sort of dunk on The Boys and say, well, we're not going to watch it, And it's like, well, I mean, so why bring it up? Like, seriously, why bring it up and then say, well, we're not going to watch it? It's like, I thought their whole thing was about watching and then reviewing shows, so it's like, why do this? It seems so bad faith. Like, I don't know how else to put that. So, again, what I intend to do is to go over the scenes, the setup, the exact scene, and how it's actually represented, death of the author and all that, pretty vital things to do as a reviewer, and actually go over what happens in the scene. Therefore, we have to talk about how we got here. So, the opening segment is them trying, or Huey, the main character, trying to get a cure for his dad, who's gotten this illness that will, reside permanently and leave him in a vegetative state, as they put it in the episode. So, out of desperation, he looks to get some V, which he knows, could potentially work, but, there are currently lingering signs of other things happening here. And, interestingly, a thing that EFap completely skips over is that the way in which he gets the V is through A-Train. And why that is so significant is that A-Train was the one who ran over Huey's girlfriend. And A-Train is already we're starting to see signs of him beginning to flip on, where his allegiances lie in this whole thing. So, we have this conflict, and Huey's so desperate that he's like, you know what, I'll water under the bridge, I'm just that desperate to save my father, go get the V. So, A-Train goes to do that. And he does it successfully, by the way. Gets the V, and since I actually reviewed, going over all the scenes, I will criticize it, because now I can, that Butcher does appear to come out of nowhere at this point in the episode to warn Huey of the potential dangers of giving V to his father. And again, I can actually criticize it because that is what happens in the show, and I don't have to talk about what the creators said or didn't say or whatever. That's what happens in the show, see? It's that easy, guys. It's that easy, EFap. So, with that being said, we can move on. So, now he has the V, and he has a choice to make now that Butcher has made all of his claims, and he's put forward his best showing to say, this V is gonna make matters worse. Excuse me. It's gonna make this situation worse, and essentially not to do it. So he is struggling internally to make that decision, and ultimately he decides not to, which again gives us a lot of morality behind, Huey's character. But of course, EFap skims over this completely, by the way. Again, surprisingly. And outside of that morality, we have the mom doing it, putting the V on when Huey goes to get a snack or whatever. So, this is when the next section is the dad awakening from said V and causing a lot of mayhem. And this is where, Huey knows that the mom did it, and the desperation, and, she gives the response of, she didn't want him to be left alone again in that way. And so, they are simultaneously dealing with, the reasonings behind it, while almost also dealing with him going on this, unknowing rampage on his own account. He seems to be losing his mind as the V is taking him over. We see him kill people, and thus they do decide, indeed, to put him down, as it were. And so, he goes to Starlight in the workplace, in their little workplace, their little base of operations, and he's like, and she knows that this has happened. It's made rather clear, and she insists, you don't have to go through with this. You can take a break, have some time. And what's important here is that Huey says, I want to focus on the mission, just, sort of blazing this trail, distraction is needed. And that really tells us another piece about Huey in this moment. That, he wants to distract himself in a very negative way. And I'm actually going to go over this, and I know that it's going to be cringe, but I'm going to use a term that's thrown around a lot. And, well, I don't apologize for it, but here we are. So there is the phrase toxic masculinity, and I believe that this is a symptom of that, is his responses here, is that he is trying his best to hold back his emotional weight due to, this feeling of needing to be masculine, which isn't the only time we have seen him feeling this need to be purely masculine. This is not the first time that this has occurred in the show. So this has been something that has been set up previously if you have been watching The Boys. So he's attempting to suppress his emotions in this way. He's trying to find a way out. And work just happens to be that excuse. Which also allows me to say that I think that's the very reason that he allows himself to be in such a compromised situation, all the way down to, yes, as sinking as low as getting sexually assaulted. And, more importantly, how that scene is played out despite what the director had said. With that being said, yes, he gets, they get one of the costumes from one of the superheroes. It's like a Spider-Man ripoff or whatever. And they suit him up. He's the one that's going to infiltrate. He gets in, and he's invited to, essentially, yes, this sex dungeon, as it were. And we have this rich, guy. I don't remember his name. He didn't seem I think this is when he was introduced, so I do apologize for not doing all of my research, but hey, it's far better than what EFap did, so I'm willing to have a few mistakes of my own, whatever. Moving right along, point being is that Huey's now in a compromised situation. He allows himself to, be placed in this situation that is very uncomfortable, and it's presented as much like none of this comes across as funny. There's no funny music playing. It's just the pacing of it, especially. It slows down to this uncomfortable crawl. So everything in this scene is playing very like the opposite of a comedy. It's like, it's tragic to a degree, dare I say, or suggest, but that's how the scene is presented. Again, despite what the creator had said. And none of this is talked about on EFAP because they wanted to paint a very clear narrative that because the creator said X, therefore it must be X, and therefore it is bad. And I don't think that is how you conduct being a good reviewer. You have to look at the work itself. What is actually present? What is being presented in the scenes? And again, it goes on, and we see Huey becoming desperate, trying to find, the safe word. And again, it's never played for comedic effect. You hear the desperation in his acting as well. Through the acting as well, you see it. You see him desperately yelling out these words, and it never comes across as comedic, because it's not. It's never presented that way. So I'm baffled, again, why EFAP decided to cover it in such a, again, just bad faith. Not looking at the scenes, not describing them as they actually are depicted in the scene. He, Mahler, the one who is describing the scene, just says, this happens, this happens, this happens, but he doesn't go into why it's happening, or, the little nuances as I'm describing the pacing, the very way it's shot, all of these things in conjuncture with the acting, and really, picking it apart more so than just describing what happens. Doing a better job at, disregarding what the creator said and actually looking at what happens. So yes, the scene does go on for quite a bit, and again, it remains uncomfortable the entire time. Thusly, it's Starlight, his girlfriend, who is worried continuously, so she's the one who insists that they go ahead and ignore, trying to stay put. They need to get in there and save Huey. So they begin to do so. Now, I guess they kind of allude to in the EFAP that the guy doing the torturing is supposed to be like a Batman rip-off because the creator said so. And bizarrely, when I was watching it, that never even, caught my attention that this was supposed to be a Batman character. It's probably because he was never in a costume in the entire scene, and, it never clicked, oh, he's super rich. Oh, all these other things that could, allude to him in the Bruce Wayne sort of, role, more so Batman, as it were. So I'd never read it as, a direct link, per se, but whatever, here we are. And nonetheless, they come to the rescue, the Starlight and company, to get him out just in time, but before he is tortured, and then even worse things are put upon Huey, due to this. And this is where EFAP stops. After, and they talk about how the scene's awful, how it's presented awfully, none of the nuance, none of the detail, because why bother, right? I mean, it's not like you should actually watch the show and actually look at the details in it. I mean, I thought that was EFAP's job, but here we are. So I digress. Huey gets saved, and I want to take you past this scene, because this is again where EFAP stops and moves on to their other topics in the video posted here on the upper left. So they move on, but I won't. So what happens after the fact is that Huey, coming back after that whole ordeal, just with Starlight, it's just the two of them, and he breaks down. He allows himself to just break down and allow himself to remove that toxic masculinity, the literal toxicity that would build up if you hold it in your tears, biologically speaking. The serotonin, which is what your tears are produced of, chemicals, falling down is actually a good thing. You're removing literal toxic masculinity from your biological body when you cry. That is biological. I'm dead serious, that's how it works. Equivalency, if you need it, it's like, say you have, a cough. It's like if you had a cough, but we're always trying to prevent yourself from coughing. And that would be bad for you, because what your body is trying to do is expel the nastiness, the germs, all the stuff building up in your body that's bad, and outputting it out of your body. That's the point of coughing, and it's the same thing with crying. And I don't think enough people talk about crying in that way, is that it's biologically harmful to, keep in those tears if you need to cry. It's actually important that you do, again, biologically speaking, because, holding in your tears, holding in those chemicals will affect your brain very likely. Just as, holding in a cough, trying to prevent yourself from expelling the sickness, your sickness will only last longer, very likely. So that is how the body functions. So Huey doing this is actually a really good thing. It's cathartic, and it's done with someone who is already sexually assaulted. She understands. She doesn't mock him. She doesn't do some comedic bit. She just holds him and allows him to cry. And that scene is completely skipped over. And I have a simple question to ask EFAP. Why? Why would you skip that scene when it's so vitally crucial to exploring all of what your criticisms are hinged upon? It seems rather bad faith to leave out the end conclusion of why this whole thing is unfolding the way it is. But that's what EFAP did. That's what Mueller did. And I'm here to call that out. It's absolute bullshit. And, furthermore, they go on to say how the characters are, they do the stick of kind of falling in line with Critical Drinker, and I'm baffled by it. Saying how the characters have flattened, how, like, they're, one-dimensional, almost caricature-esque, all that sort of stuff, going in line with the idea that The Boys as a satire is too direct. Which, I'm sorry, that has got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard EFAP ever say. I mean, if you're gonna call that out, call out South Park. Do it. Do it, you fucking cowards. Say that South Park is the same level, because it is. It's that direct in its, satire. Look at any of their episodes. Look at the whole Disney thing that they did. How is that not a direct one-to-one in criticizing the extreme, conservatives and the extreme lefties? How is that not direct satire? You have to admit it that it is, right? That South Park is. And I thought that there was no better example than that episode, because they praised that episode. I remember it. I don't know which episode it's on, so unfortunately I can't give you a clip. But I know they praised South Park, so it's interesting that all of a sudden, when someone else has direct subtlety, and it's someone they clearly disagree with, now all of a sudden, hey, it's bad, because he said it was funny. Even though, again, death of the author, right? Completely thrown out the window. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable the lengths that they went to absolute dismantle The Boys. So I'm going to do everyone a favor, if you are watching this video and for this long, I'm going to go over some of the character things that are happening, at least in this season. Again, I've already mentioned spoilers, but these are just some of the other ones outside of the focus. A lot of that had to do with Huey. So we have Kimiko and dealing with, I believe it's her sister, or someone she knows. It's one of those two. In this sort of being raised against each other sort of thing going on. They're setting a lot of stuff up. They have MM, or Mother's Milk, going through being stressed, and, connecting that with Huey, his own toxic masculinity. We see that also sort of hitting in with MM as well. We see him, faint and have a panic, or I believe they say it's a panic attack in the episode, due to the amount of stress that he's been pressing on himself as well. We have Butcher, deciding whether or not he's gonna, continue to torture this guy for a way to kill Homelander via this virus, though the guy said that the virus that would, if it needed to be that potent, that it would kill all soups. So one of the people he's trying to look after in this case would be Ryan, Homelander's son. So there's that compromise for Butcher's character in what he will actually do with that decision, as his mind is also simultaneously breaking down, seeing these illusionary people, his wife, and I believe it's one of his co-workers during these war escapades they set up for him to sort of interact with sort of the angel and devil sort of aspects of his character. So there's a lot going on there in it of itself. We have Frenchie, who is dealing with having a partner, this guy who he killed the family of, and after it sort of comes to a way and he reveals such information, he is so guilt-ridden that he's having all of these flashes, and then he admits to it, and then he goes to the police and admits it. So he's been feeling this guilt in himself for quite some time. It has been building up from prior episodes as well, but it's really focused on here in this episode in particular. And then there's Homelander, and I'll leave it on Homelander because I find this one fascinating. So Homelander has the opportunity, and does so. He finds the people responsible for his little being captured and experimented on via science and all that. He goes down to those people for the first time and proceeds to torture and kill them in ways that he would find either amusing / linked to a way that he was once mocked as a kid. He chose revenge. He chose to sickly revenge him, his work upon these individuals. And when there was one woman left, and I believe she was like a higher up, the scene we leave upon is the rest of the people dead in the room, and then she's left alive in that same room that he was once cast in. So this is our main antagonist, our main villain. And yeah, I'll easily go as far as to say villain, not antagonist. And his outcome was vengeance. While Huey, in comparison, our main protagonist, chose forgiveness, despite what happened to his girlfriend. When given the opportunity to be like, fuck you, A-Train, he went, no. Water under the bridge. I'm far too concerned what is happening with my father. I'm letting it go. And that's the difference between our hero and our villain, is this ability to forgive, and versus, this overdone vengeance cycle that Homelander unleashes upon his victims. So that is that. And we have, other moments like Starlight dealing with, and I don't remember her opponent's name. It's this new 7 member that they just picked up, so I do apologize for not remembering her name. And she's like, she knew Starlight in the past, so she confronts this whole thing about abortion, which, in real life is a big topic right now, making the satire hit 1-to-1, which is what South Park used to do. Again, I'm gonna go right back to it. The whole thing with Disney, right? They did that pretty close to when Disney has still been doing this, so again, I would like to see EFaps square that one away. And, satire versus directness or subtlety. That discussion seemed to be very in the one way of it has to be subtle, which I find, again, baffling as a decision. It just seems very weird, considering what other satires I have seen. And boy howdy, are like 99% of them very brutal, direct. And yeah, I will say some of them aren't funny, but, or some of them, the satire's like, completely off this mark or whatever, but here we are with, satire that is hitting 1-to-1 what is happening so close to what is happening in real life that it's like, oh, they are punching. They are not afraid to punch, and good. Like, punch. Punch hard. Punch the hardest, because that's what satire ought to do. I would figure, since most satire seems to do it, right? Again, I would struggle to find examples of subtle satire. EFAP didn't provide any, so I can't, counter them. Again, they seem to insist that that's the better option, but they didn't, say, here's an example of this. They didn't do that. Why? If that is something that you truly believe is the better option, then provide an example, please. Because otherwise, I'm left to only think that the better option is directness, being bold, being punchy with your satire. And that's exactly what The Boys aims to do. And it hits both sides. It did in Season 3, and it continues to do in Season 4, with a lot of setups for their characters. And thus far, I gotta say, if it continues on that track, and it, lands each of their character dilemmas, I would argue that Season 4 is easily the best season if it squares away the majority of the issues. Obviously, they have another season already sort of confirmed, so I wouldn't expect them to hit all of them, but, some of them. Square some of those, stories away. If they can do that, and that alone, I would argue that easily The Boys Season 4 is the best season of The Boys. Easily, without question. The Boys has always hit, as far as I'm concerned. They have not missed. They have not misstepped. All of this nonsense that EFAP has gone on about how it's become bad, or, mentioning all the politics, it's well, yeah, that's sort of what the show just is, though. It's your criticism would have to be, therefore, it ought not to even exist as is, or exist at all. It seems to be the only option if you were to take EFAP's approach to this criticism. It's but why? I'm sorry, but The Boys, again, has been on the ball. And again, I'm purely going on what I've seen. And again, I even took you and gave you a criticism of it. It's not perfect. I said that Butcher does come out of nowhere in that one scene. He does. That's still true. But despite that one flaw, which I would not say breaks the entire show, or season for that matter, far from it, it's still a mistake, but still, that does not automatically then equal, therefore bad. It's no, you can work around that. You can find improvements, or, how you'd find out Huey was going there and all that stuff, and having a proper setup. You could do all, yeah, I can go over all that stuff. But at least I'm saying what's in the show. At least I'm being faithful to what's in the show, and not, going to the creator. Because again, it's nonsense. It's why? Why feel the need to do that unless you're trying to paint a very obvious picture, which I felt Mueller did very expertly, and dare I say sneakily almost. But I'm not going to let him get away with it. That's not how this rolls. No, I'm going to continue to watch The Boys Season 4, that's for sure. But I'm also just going to review the show when its season is done. And I'm going to review it on the merits on what I have seen from the point I have talked about to the previous episodes, and then onwards to sort of disclose the rest of the season. But I will do that on my own terms without looking the need to find what a director said about a thing, even its own director, because that is unfair. It is. It is, again, why would you not take death of the author into the account? I thought review, and I thought one of their, harder beliefs in this whole thing was to, again, look at a piece of work and judge it for what's in there. In there, and just all of that. And let it speak for itself. Let the presentation of what you are seeing, what you are hearing, let those things dictate. if a thing is good or not. And that's it. That's all you need to do to be a good reviewer, as far as I'm concerned. And then, I try to go the extra mile in saying how to improve it if it is bad. But so far, what I have seen of The Boys is nothing short of a lot of setups and a spectacular episode that was completely misconstructed by EFap. Absolutely misconstructed by using the director's words to mingle in, where they thought the scene was, how it was constructed, how it was actually visualized, how it was acted out, all of these things. None of are present in the show. So, yeah, that is my video. And if this ever happens again, I will call it out again, because this is bullshit. That coverage of The Boys on EFAP 292 was some of the worst coverage I've ever seen from them, and that's saying a lot. Apparently they have other bad takes on shows I haven't seen, like Terriers or something. I haven't seen all of Terriers, so I don't want to speak to that because I haven't seen all of it. Apparently they got the genre wrong. Again, I think that's true from what I've seen of it so far. But I wouldn't want to put 100% stamp on that, but I would assume that that's true now, accordingly. And apparently their coverage of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the series, the original one, was also fairly bad. I've seen it, their coverage of it, a long time ago, so I don't remember most of the points in conjuncture to how bad it is. Apparently they give it like a 4 out of 10. It's like, I definitely put a huge question mark on a 4 out of 10 for a flagship Nickelodeon show that offset the king of Nickelodeon for, its predecessor for Avatar: The Last Airbender, that being SpongeBob SquarePants, and having that be dethroned by Avatar: The Last Airbender when it came out, or shortly thereafter. It's like, I don't think that just happened for being a 4 out of 10 show. Like, that does not compute, and I don't think a lot of the points, I don't remember a lot of them, but I don't think a lot of those points would probably hold up that well, very likely, considering what just happened for this coverage. But again, it's been a while, so I don't remember their points, but I digress. So, yeah, that's my take, my breakdown of The Boys and EFAP's coverage of The Boys. And I do apologize that, I couldn't show clips. It would have to take me finding clips, putting them in here. I went based on if you have already seen it. Or, on good faith, again, you would just mayhaps believe what I'm putting down here. And if you don't believe me, it's right there. I'll also link it in the description, so you can just watch it for yourself. It's in the opening segment, as I described. I don't remember the exact timestamp, but it's there. I'm not gonna hide it. It's like, you can watch it for yourself. You can see how they use the creator's intent, in his words, more importantly, to dismantle the show. And it's like, to me, that's not a good reviewer practice. It never has been, never will be, etc., etc. So, if you did enjoy this video, then do all the stuff. I don't feel like supporting myself in this one, but, the links will still be there despite me, whatever. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.